A Middle East peace agreement update. The Catholic Church against world government and President Trump's war on the World Health Organization. All in the news today. And we will analyze the prophetic implications of these events on this edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. Now, in looking at President Trump's Middle East peace agreement and what the progression of that and what's going on in the Middle East, there is a very good possibility Israel could extend sovereignty of the Jewish settlements in the West Bank in a couple of months. And I want to make sure you understand the history behind this event, and then we will examine some of the key areas of this annexation process, the sovereignty process, which is very prophetic, because you can say to someone, hey, Israel's going to apply sovereignty to the West Bank, or they're going to start annexing this, and they say, oh, that sounds good, but they don't really know what it means, and they don't understand the gravity of the situation and how it ties in possibly to the prophecies of the Bible. So I'm going to give you some history. I'll bring you up to today, and then we'll analyze this sovereignty process. What's going to happen? And we're going to answer a lot of specific questions, get into the details of that. So by the time the program's done, you will understand exactly what's going on in the Middle East. And then if we have time, I got some other stories I want to get to. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. Let's go. Originally, back 4,000 years ago, God makes a covenant with Abraham. It's in Genesis 15:18. The Bible says, in the same day that the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river in Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. And of course, you can see modern day Israel is only a very small portion of the original promised land. Well, of course, then 1,000 years later, Jerusalem becomes Israel's capital. King David made Jerusalem Israel's capital in 1000 BC. And then the first temple is built on the Temple Mount. King Solomon, David's son, built Israel's first temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and he dedicated it in 968 BC. And God said to Solomon concerning Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, I will put my name there forever. That's 1 Kings 9:3. So God chose Israel's capital as Jerusalem. It wasn't Netanyahu. It wasn't the international community. It wasn't President Trump. Almighty God did that. And then the first temple is destroyed, and then you have the 70-year exile. Remember, the Babylonians, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, destroyed the first temple in 586 BC and carried the people of Judah away into Babylonian captivity. That's when Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children and all of them, they went down into the first wave in Babylonian captivity at this point. And then, after the 70-year exile, the second temple is built on the Temple Mount. When the 70-year exile expired, the Jews returned to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. And the second temple was completed in 516 BC. And Jerusalem continued to be Israel's capital until the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 AD. And then around 135 AD, the Roman Emperor Hadrian forbade the Jews from entering Jerusalem. And after this, the Jews were allowed to visit Jerusalem only one day of the year. That's Tisha B'Av. And this was the day on which Jews mourned the destruction of the first and second temples. And because of the escalating Roman persecution at that time, Jews began to be scattered throughout the world. And that's what led to the 2,000-year, almost a 2,000-year exile. So for the next almost close to 2,000 years, not quite, of this exile, it was like 1,878 years. It lasted from 70 A.D. until 1948. So during this time, religious Jews prayed 3 times a day for the rebuilding of the temple with their faces turned towards Jerusalem. And when Jews were parting company, the customary greeting was, next year in Jerusalem. During the exile, it became a Jewish custom during a marriage ceremony for the groom to crush a glass beneath his foot. And this was to signify that on the happiest day of his life, he couldn't be totally happy without, while the Jewish temple was destroyed. Well, that brings us to World War I. And I'm covering a lot of ground here real quick. So when we're coming up to a break, when we get back from the break, we'll start at World War I, and I will bring you all the way up to today. And we're going through the history because I want you to understand the significance of what is about to transpire here beginning July 1. It's very important, very prophetic.
I have left a piece of my heart in Israel and her people. We would like to thank Endtime for doing such an awesome job with our Israel tour. We marvel at your team keeping the time schedule, keeping everyone comfortable, the wonderful driver, the brilliant guide, the entire tour program, good hotel choices, and stellar food. We had the privilege to rub shoulders with Pastor Baxter, listen to his current teachings, and had some interesting questions answered so eloquently. He is wonderful. Helene from Australia.
Experience the Holy Land in the most amazing way. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter for our upcoming Israel tour. For more information, go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, End Time Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
So we're going to go through some more history, and then I'll bring you up to today, and then we'll dive off into the sovereignty and annexation of the West Bank. What's getting ready to happen here looks like on July 1. They're going to start the process. But I have a quick announcement. Because of this coronavirus situation, our prophecy conference schedule was totally wiped out. I mean, we had to cancel so many conferences. But guess what? We get to start that back up. And next Friday and Saturday, that would be the May 29 and May 30, I will be in Jena, Louisiana. I'm going to be at the Shady Grove United Pentecostal Church, 1384 Highway 460, and that's, of course, Jena, Louisiana. And again, that's Friday, May 29th at 7 p.m., Saturday, May 30th at 6 p.m. Friday night, I'll do Satan's End Time Plan Revealed. And then on Saturday night, I'll be doing Breaking Prophetic Fulfillments, an updated one. So you won't want to miss that. If you're anywhere, I know last time I was down there, I had people come from all over Louisiana, and it was awesome. And I want to let you know that the church is a big church. It has plenty of room for social distancing. And so come one, come all. Be my first conference after the coronavirus situation. And we'll be in Gina, Louisiana. If you'd like more information on that, go to endtime.com. And all the information's right there under the events and then prophecy conferences tabs. So check it out. Next Thursday and Friday, or next Friday and Saturday, we'll be in Gina, Louisiana. Now, let's get down through some more of this history. World War I comes along. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire captured Jerusalem in 1516 A.D. And the Ottoman control of the Middle East continued until World War I. And with the defeat of Turkey's Ottoman Empire in 1917, control of the Middle East shifted to Great Britain and France. Then you have the Balfour Declaration. When the Holy Land came under the control of the British, influential Jews petitioned the British government to facilitate the establishment of a homeland for the Jews. And this is very prophetic. Ezekiel chapter 37 is a prophecy. Ezekiel's boneyard is a prophecy of the gathering back together of the Jews. This is the beginning of that. On November 2nd, 1917, British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour wrote to Lord Walter Rothschild. And he said, the letter said this: His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine. The Promised Land at that time was called Palestine. The establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. So this historical statement from the British government became known as the Balfour Declaration. Well, then you have the British Mandate. So the British Mandate. So at the 1920 San Remo Conference, the victor nations of World War I assigned the mandate of Palestine to the United Kingdom under Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations. And the Allies also decided to make the UK responsible for putting into effect its own Balfour Declaration of 1917. So this action of the League of Nations enshrined the Balfour Declaration into international law. Now, they don't normally talk about this kind of stuff when you talk about international law. They talk about, post-67 borders, it's against international law, this, that, and the other. But the fact of the matter is that once you go back through history, they said, hey, there needs to be an Israeli nation there. Now, you get off into what the United Nations gave them in the original partition, things like that. But there is a law that supersedes international law by far. There's no comparison, and that's the Bible. That's God's promise to Abraham that he would have that entire promised land from the river in Egypt all the way up to the Euphrates for the people of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and that lineage forever. So to me, international law, that's irrelevant when it comes to the Bible. But they don't see it that way. So then that brings us to Hitler's horrible Holocaust. Back in 1939, the world's worst war up to this point broke out. And over the next 6 years, 52 million human beings met violent deaths in these wars. Well, among these were 6 million Jews that Adolf Hitler shipped off to concentration camps. And just when the Jewish people thought their lives couldn't get any worse, it did. Hitler's gas chambers and crematoriums cruelly snuffed out young and old alike. And Hitler's goal was to rid the earth of the Jews once and for all. And he called his extermination campaign the final solution. So if you've ever been to a Holocaust museum, we go every year. We go twice a year to Israel. We go to Yad Vashem in Israel. Horrible experience. I don't even like going through there. If I have to go through, I'll almost pretty much walk straight through. I've been through there many times. Horrible experience. Everybody on earth needs to go through there at least once. But if you've ever been through there, there's some horrible photographs and videos and things to watch. I don't even like going through there, but sometimes on a tour I have to. But there are people on earth that actually deny that happened. But just go through a Holocaust museum. I promise you it happened. Very real, horrible experience. I've been to a concentration camp in Breendonk, and wow, what Hitler did to those individuals, those Jews, man, it's horrible. And ask God to keep His hands on the survivors and the remnants of those people. I've talked to many Jews. We've had guides and people that their family went through that, and they lost things and family and just horrible. But it did happen in the history of Israel. So once that occurred, though, on the heels of that, the UN votes to establish a Jewish state. You know, when the magnitude of Hitler's horrible Holocaust was revealed to the world, and you understand that the Vatican just let out a lot of documents just prior to this coronavirus pandemic that hit the world, and a lot of people dove off into some of them documents that had been sealed for a long, long time, and they found out that the Pope at that time, you can read this, go to the Jerusalem Post, other news sources, that Pope Pius at that time he knew about what was going on with the Jews, and they said that he actually allowed some of the nuns, some of their churches, the Nazi soldiers were allowed to come in to those churches, and they were like kind of hospital type situations. Some of the nuns were nurses to them, and that he would allow the priests to go out on the front lines and administer like their last rites and things like that to the German soldiers. A lot of this just came out. You can read articles on it online. So, after the Holocaust, the collective guilt of the world's nations compelled them to finally grant the Jewish people a place to call home. Because a lot of Jews tried to escape into other nations and they wouldn't let them in. It was horrible what happened, if you understand the history of it. Well, on November 29, 1947, the United Nations voted to partition the area of the British Mandate into an Arab state and an Israeli state. And the Jews, thrilled to have a homeland after almost 2,000 years of being sifted through the nations, they accepted the partition plan with joy. It wasn't near what God had promised Abraham, but they said, hey, we want a homeland. Yes, we'll take whatever you give us. And I mean, it was a very thin strip of land, almost embarrassing if you look at the original partition plan, what they gave them. But the Jews accepted it. Well, the Arabs immediately rejected that plan. And they didn't want a state. They simply wanted to eradicate the Jews out of the Jewish homeland. And so Israel declared independence on 1948, May 14th, 1948. And, you know, after policing the area of Palestine for 28 years, the British were tired of continual conflict between the Arabs and the Jews. And they wanted out. So finally, the British announced that they were concluding the British Mandate on May 14th, 1948. Well, the decision would leave Palestine with no one to keep order there. So when British forces left on May 14th, the Jews made their move, and Israel the same day declared its independence, and they were a nation. Well, the Arabs didn't like that. So the very next day, on May 15th, 1948, 5 Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, launched a war against just a baby, a newborn Jewish state. And in 1949, from the May 15th all the way into 1949, a ceasefire was reached between Jordan and Israel. And it's the armistice agreement. And Jordan occupied the West Bank. They came over into the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, all the way up into East Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount. Now, remember, it was just Palestine before that. But once they had the War of Independence that lasted until 1949, Jordan invaded and illegally occupied what today is considered the West Bank. And they came and took control of the Temple Mount. So, and this is very important that you understand this, because when I get into annexation in a minute, then you'll understand what's really going on here. And Israel claiming sovereignty over this. Because you're not going to get the story laid out like this on the evening news tonight, okay? So I wanted to make sure you understood the history, and then when I get into what's going to happen in beginning July 1, then you'll really understand. And it's so important that Irvin Baxter devoted his next article in Endtime magazine to this. So it's very important that everybody understands what's going on. So Israel controlled its partitioned area that the United Nations has given them in the partition plan, plus what it gained as a result of the war. And that included West Jerusalem. None of Jerusalem was in the original partition plan. But as a result of the war, they pushed back, and when they came to the armistice agreement, 1949, Israel, the Israelis, this fledgling nation, controlled up to West Jerusalem, and then Jordan illegally occupied up to East Jerusalem. So in 1948, when the Jordanians invaded the West Bank in an attempt to destroy the new nation of Israel, as soon as it was born, they drove out every person living out there in the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. And consequently, there were 0 Jews living in the West Bank when Israel reclaimed that territory in 1967. You say, well, how'd that work? Well, Jordan occupied the West Bank and East Jerusalem from 1948 to or from 1949, the Armistice Agreement, to 1967. And yet the Palestinians never bothered to declare a Palestinian state or to claim Jerusalem as their capital, because that was not their goal. You understand, the PLO was created in 1964, prior to the 67 war. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. What were they trying to liberate? They were trying to liberate that area, the Palestine, of Jews. And that's what they're still trying to do. So in 1967, when the Jordanians were driven back into their own country in the 6 Days War, Jews began to return to their homes, and many other Jews built homes on the unoccupied ground. Because remember, Jews lived out there originally. You will never hear this in the news. But Jews lived out there originally, and when Jordan attacked in 1949, they drove them Jews out of there. Well, now they started to move back, and those homes multiplied into settlements, and then ultimately became towns that are referred to as settlements today. And as a result, there are around 800,000 Jews living in Judea, Samaria, the Jordan Valley, and in East Jerusalem. And so it is this West Bank territory where Palestinians want to establish their Palestinian state. So what do we do? And this is a real problem, because what do we do with the Jews living out there? I mean, if it were up to the Palestinians, they would take over all of Israel. But what they've said is, hey, we need to go back to 67 borders. And of course, like I said, that would leave Israel just at 9 miles wide at the waist, totally indefensible. Israel says, no, that can't happen. So how do we do this? What do we do? Well, in a speech to a joint meeting of the U.S. Congress in 2011, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated, he said, in any peace agreement that ends the conflict, some settlements will end up beyond Israel's borders. That is exactly what's going to happen. How do we know that? According to Scripture. Jesus talked about the prophecy in Matthew chapter 24, let them which be in Judea flee. He was saying Jews will get to live out there. They'll be living out there at the time of the Great Tribulation when it happens and during the final 7 years. So, former Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad offered a solution to the problem. He said, hey, the Jews could remain in the new Palestinian state just like there are Arabs living in the Israeli state. So, how are they going to solve this conflict? Many people see this as the most unsolvable issue on the planet. I mean, there are people that have tried many peace plans to try to get this solved. Nothing has worked. Well, according to Bible prophecy, there is going to be a Palestinian-Israeli peace agreement that will signal the beginning of the final 7 years to Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. The final 7 years will begin when the Antichrist and the international community give their support to Israel's right to exist in the land promised to Abraham by God back in Genesis 15:18. And this is called the confirmation of the covenant in Daniel 9:27. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has openly stated that the number one goal of his administration is to obtain the support of the international community for Israel's final borders. And he openly embraced the two-state solution in his famous University of Bar Ilan speech. And back in, that was 2009. And then, so we know prophetically that a peace agreement is coming. That's how they're going to solve this. Say, well, does it look like it right now? At this stage, it's questionable. But that's what the Bible says is going to happen. When it happens, the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ will begin. And that's why we talk about it almost every day on the radio.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
I have left a piece of my heart in Israel and her people. We would like to thank Endtime for doing such an awesome job with our Israel tour. We marvel at your team keeping the time schedule, keeping everyone comfortable, the wonderful driver, the brilliant guide, the entire tour program, good hotel choices, and stellar food. We had the privilege to rub shoulders with Pastor Baxter, listen to his current teachings, and had some interesting questions answered so eloquently. He is wonderful. Helene from Australia.
Experience the Holy Land in the most amazing way. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter for our upcoming Israel tour. For more information, go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he has actually stated that as a result of a future peace agreement, he would be willing to allow Israelis to remain in the West Bank under Palestinian rule. Well, when the prophesied peace agreement is finally concluded, this is the solution to the settlement problem that will be implemented. Remember, all those Jews moved back in there after the 67 war when Israel drove Jordan back across the Jordan Valley. So the arrangement will work for 3.5 years. Jesus prophesied at the time the Palestinians would turn on the Jews living among them and would begin to slaughter them. And this is what's going to trigger the time known as the Great Tribulation. So it is possible President Trump's peace plan could be the peace agreement setting the stage for this prophecy to be fulfilled. What's happening right now? Well, Israel just formed a government. The agreement signed between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Benny Gantz allows Netanyahu to begin to implement portions of the President Trump's peace plan July 1. So let me explain. Israel Hayam, they published an article, and I thought you guys need to know this. A Guide to the Perplexed. What does Israel's sovereignty move mean? We talk about it all the time. Hey, in the beginning of July, Israel's going to extend sovereignty out there. They're going to annex this. And a lot of people are like, hey, that sounds great. What does that mean? So I want to make sure that you understood in detail what's about to play out. The Trump administration's vision for peace has created a whole host of rumors on whether Israel will extend its sovereignty to certain areas in Judea and Samaria. And the new government's guidelines stipulate that it could happen as early as July 1. But what exactly are we talking about? Well, I want to answer some questions for you today. What does applying sovereignty mean? Well, Israel has regarded Judea and Samaria as not occupied territories, but disputed territories, which is a true statement, since their capture in 1967, the Six-Day War. So if it was to extend its sovereignty to these certain areas, they would become Israel territory. So this is how, now that's a very weighty statement, because you realize in the eyes of the international community and international law, that's illegal. But President Trump's peace plan and the document that was just signed by Prime Minister Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, this new government, that's what's fixing to happen in the face of international law, which says it's illegal. So how do you apply sovereignty? Well, in a basic sense, through a cabinet resolution or Knesset law, stipulating that the laws of the state of Israel apply in those areas. Another step could have Israel announce that it no longer considers those areas to be in dispute, but rather as part of Israel. And then, of course, we know that the Trump administration has said that they are going to recognize that. And so you're talking about very weighty things going to happen beginning the first part of July in the eyes of the international community. I mean, the EU, everybody is screaming and howling over this. The United Nations, we will not back that. And it's, there's going to be, we're going to have to penalize them and this, that, and the other. I mean, they do not want that to happen. But it looks like they're just going to do it anyway. So another question, where will sovereignty be applied? Well, the Trump plan grants Israel 30% of Judea and Samaria. And remember, Prime Minister Netanyahu worked with Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, President Trump, all of these guys. He told them, here's what we have to have: 4 defensible borders. The international community wants them to go back. The Obama administration, everybody has said, no, we've got to go back to 67 borders. Israel said, no way. There's no way we could defend those borders. We need to have the West Bank, much of it, and we need to have the Jordan Valley. So a mapping committee is working to delineate the exact borders. And it's likely that sovereignty would be applied on the Jordan Valley and on the Israeli communities in Samaria, the Binyamin region, Gush Etzion. And we go to Gush Etzion every year to on our tours. We take people out there. We want them to understand really what's going on and what the peace agreement means. And then Mount Hebron. So the roads leading to those communities will also be defined as part of Israel. Now, I talked to a friend of mine in Israel that lives out in the settlements, And he said that they've already started one of these roads. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm going off of what he said. Perhaps they just started to build a road, and he said it's one of those roads. I don't know. I'm just telling you what he told me. And it could be one of those roads. I don't know. Another question, is sovereignty good for Israel? Well, compared with what other U.S. administrations have proposed, there's no doubt that the Trump plan is better. For example, under this plan, Israel keeps 30% rather than 5% of Judea and Samaria. So that's better than the other plans that have been laid out. Israeli security experts believe that continued Israeli presence in the Jordan Valley must be part of any deal, and an overwhelming majority of Israelis and decision makers agree with applying sovereignty. Now, some worry that the move would hurt the peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt. But I don't think Netanyahu's worried about that. He may say, I'm worried, but he knows that what would you rather be? At odds with Jordan and Egypt, or have the Jordan Valley and be able to defend Israel's borders? Honestly, I think Jordan needs Israel so much there's no way that they would ever come in conflict with them. Sure, King Abdullah can say, no, we'll shut our peace agreement off and this, that, and the other. I mean, that could happen, but I highly doubt that at this point. Jordan needs Israel, I promise you, just like other nations do for their protection against what Iran's trying to do in the Middle East. So they may say at this point, hey, we're going to cut off ties with Israel, but that would be a huge mistake for them because Israel supports them in many ways. Now, does Israel get this for free? Well, no. Israel's going to agree to give up 70% of Judea and Samaria under the peace plan, and to swap land in the Negev, the Negev desert in the south, in order to expand the Gaza Strip substantially. So Israel, they're going to also agree to the creation of a Palestinian state in the area that it will leave, and to establish a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem, beyond the barrier, the security barrier. When you drive into East Jerusalem, let's say you're going to drive from Jerusalem down into Bethlehem, about, 4 or 5 miles. When you approach Bethlehem, you see this giant concrete wall all the way, I mean, as far as you can see, and you've got to go through that concrete barrier to get into Bethlehem. Well, that's what would happen here. The Palestinian capital would be located on the other side of, still in East Jerusalem, but on the other side of that barrier. In addition, now that's in President Trump's plan, you understand. So in addition, Israel will agree to release Palestinian prisoners, except murderers or those who tried to murder. So, and Israel's going to also agree to a 4-year moratorium on settlement construction in many communities in Judea, Samaria. So no, Israel's not getting this for free. They're going to have to give some. And Prime Minister Netanyahu knows that they're going to have to give some. To ever get the international community to buy in, and the Palestinians, this, that, and the other, they're going to have to be a two-state solution. It's in President Trump's peace initiative. So why is the Trump plan better than previous plans? Well, another thing, unlike past plans, the Trump vision makes all the gains for the Palestinians contingent on a long list of fundamental steps towards reconciliation. And this is very, very important, because past plans have said, no, we just got to have a two-state solution. It's got to be based on 67 borders, this, that, and the other. It didn't really, they still had the veto power. They still had quite a bit of freedom and this, that, and the other. This plan is contingent on a list of fundamental steps, and which includes a complete cessation of anti-Israel incitement. Imagine having Israel and the Palestinian state within just, 10 or 15 miles. that want to drive you off into the sea. No, they got to stop that. And ending the payment to terrorists, they got to stop that, as well as avoiding legal action against Israel at the International Criminal Court at The Hague, which the Palestinians seem like they're almost continuously doing. And as U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, told Israel Hayam, Israel is going to have to live with the Palestinian state when the Palestinians become Canadians. In other words, they're like, look how we would be with Canada. That's how Israel's going to be with them. I mean, we're going to be right there. And when the Palestinians become Canadians, all your issues should go away, right? Well, another question, will sovereignty move? Will it have to wait until the Palestinians become a Canadian? In other words, will they have to accept this plan to live right by Israel next door? They live in the south right now. That's not, it's going to be different than them living up there right in the West Bank and things. No. President Trump said that the mapping committee will convert the conceptual map that he issued in his plan into a more detailed and calibrated rendering so that the recognition can be immediately achieved. And the United States will recognize Israel's sovereignty over this territory that my vision provides to be part of the state of Israel in the Trump plan. So Ambassador Friedman has also said that this can be carried out within several weeks. See how close this is. The first part of July, they can start moving on this. So, will Israel take this step very soon? Well, this depends on Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu is taking all the preparatory steps, and if he does that, President Trump will give him a green light. And you say, well, isn't Trump supposed to decide on this? Well, Trump can always place pressure, but he has already given his approval, and many in his administration would support an Israeli move on this matter, including Vice President Pence, his Chief of Staff, and his Secretary of State, and Ambassador to Israel. So his senior advisor and son, Jared Kushner, his position, it's almost likely going to carry significant weight, but he's most likely focused now on he's focused on the U.S. economy's recovery in the wake of this coronavirus crisis. So it's in Trump's political interest that Israel makes this move, because many in his base are from the evangelical right and are very much in favor of this move. So it's likely that Trump would want this to take place before the presidential election in the fall, which is another very important thing that Prime Minister Netanyahu is considering, this very short window to get this thing done.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-ENDTIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
So another question is concerning this sovereignty in Israel, what they're going to, extending sovereignty out in the West Bank. Why is the left against the plan? Well, of course, it entails risks, because every step taken in this arena touches on many very sensitive matters. If sovereignty is extended, it could result in riots. Jordan has warned that it might scale back relations. I'd like to see that. I don't know. We'll see. European countries and most likely the EU itself are going to be furious and quote unquote, they're saying they're threatening to punish Israel economically. Israel is also going to face legal challenges at The Hague for this move, probably. And so the move could trigger a backlash from countries in the region and elsewhere. So what does Israel have to gain by doing this? Well, extending sovereignty will allow for the first time since the state's founding in 1948 to define Israel's borders. All of this is very prophetic. Even though much of Judea and Samaria will be lost, and despite the settlement freeze and the creation of the enclaves for Jewish communities, it's clear that for us in the world, what Israel's borders will be. In addition, many of the Trump plan's principles are better to Israel than what other plans have offered, by far. So it does not call for the eviction of settlers, and it gives the Palestinians 4 years to respond positively and become, let's say, quote unquote, Canadian or next door neighbors. If they continue with their intransigence, it's possible that in 4 years down the road, the U.S. will let Israel add more territory under the plan. So, are the Arabs truly angry over this move? No. The Arab world is paying lip service to the Palestinians, even though it has had it with them. Even some Jordanians think that having the Jordan Valley become part of Israel would be good for their kingdom, but they're afraid to say it out loud. Egypt and many Arab states have welcomed President Trump's vision or his peace initiative and have not joined the chorus of detractors and the threats made by Jordan's King Abdullah. So, in the news, I heard Jared Kushner say, Trump's son-in-law, he said that in the news, these people will get on there and say, no, we're not going to do this and we're opposed to it. But behind closed doors in these meetings that they have, they're much more willing to negotiate. So it's something to consider when we're looking at this thing progressing forward very quickly before they want to try to get something huge done before the election, the U.S. election in November. So another question, will Jordan or Egypt abrogate the peace treaties with Israel? Well, such a scenario is unlikely. I mean, Egypt has not really commented on this sovereignty issue, and Jordan's King Abdullah has talked about the move triggering a clash with Israel, and he may recall his ambassador or even suspend the deal to buy gas from Israel. But abrogating the peace treaty is going to hurt Jordan more than it hurts Israel, and it'll lead to a furious response from the United States. So the king, in his way, will try to maneuver between the angry street on the one hand and Israel and the U.S. on the other hand, and he's done it before. So it looks like, I mean, he's very good at that, believe me. So can the process be phased over a long period? No. The Americans want the sovereignty move to take place in one fell swoop. And how will it unfold? That's the main question. Well, it looks like with everything going so quickly that we should know something by the end of the summer. Now, there are a million things that, I mean, are we going to have this resurgence of this coronavirus and everybody go back into lockdown? I mean, there are a million things that could happen. But if you understand the dynamics of what's going on in the political sphere with the U.S. election coming up, President Trump against, former Vice President Biden, and both of them not seeing eye to eye on what's going on, and Prime Minister Netanyahu recognizing that, hey, I've got to get something done while President Trump's in office. There's a potential for him to be, defeated in November. I don't know. I mean, we'll just have to see. But if things move on as they are and everything starts first part of July, they could really move quickly and get something a lot done before the elections in November. We'll just have to see how it all plays out. Now, Let me shift gears on you. And I'm going to go through at least one more topic here, and that is the Israel National News reported that Trump has threatened to withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization. Not just cut off funding, but to withdraw. So what happened? Well, he slammed the World Health Organization's response to the coronavirus pandemic and its position regarding China and Taiwan. And President Trump has given them a 30-day deadline to reform, or we're out. So what happened? Well, President Trump, he warned the World Health Organization yesterday that the U.S. will permanently cut all funding for this international health organization, which is an arm of the global governing United Nations, if it does not make major reforms within the next month. So in a 4-page letter, President Trump castigated the World Health Organization's response to the coronavirus pandemic from December of last year through April. And he cited the World Health Organization's failure to take early reports on the spread seriously and ignoring early warnings by Taiwanese health officials who had been informed by their Chinese counterparts that the novel coronavirus could spread by human-to-human transition. Trump accused the World Health Organization of towing the line for China, both in regard to Beijing's refusal to recognize Taiwanese independence and in its denials regarding the dangers presented by the virus. So he said on January 14, 2020, the World Health Organization gratuitously reaffirmed China's now debunked claim that the coronavirus could not be transmitted between humans. And this assertion was in direct conflict with censored reports from Wuhan. And President Xi Jinping of China, he reportedly pressured you not to declare the coronavirus outbreak an emergency. You gave into this, the World Health Organization gave into this pressure the next day and told the world that the coronavirus did not pose a public health emergency of international concern. Well, just over a week later, on January 30th, overwhelming evidence to the contrary forced you, the World Health Organization, to reverse course. And President Trump also lambasted the World Health Organization for pushing back against his China travel ban and the World Health Organization's recommendations to other countries that they not impose limitations on international travel. So, this was in a letter by President Trump to the World Health Organization. President Trump concluded the letter by laying down a 30-day deadline for major substantive improvements in the World Health Organization. If the WHO fails to satisfy President Trump administration's call to reform, he said, I will make temporary freeze of the U.S. funding to the World Health Organization permanent and reconsider our membership in the organization. Last month, President Trump, you remember, suspended U.S. funding of the WHO, and the U.S. contributes roughly $900 million to the WHO's 2-year budget cycle. So, or just about 1/5 of the organization's total budget. So the U.S. is the World Health Organization's largest contributor. Why did I bring this up? Well, we know prophetically speaking that America will not be part of the end-time world governing body. You know that the seven-headed, ten-horned beast in Revelation 13, the United States, the eagle, is not mentioned in that beast. So this, the World Health Organization, is one more global governing institution that President Trump is considering pulling the United States out of. You remember the President Trump's rebuke of NATO for not paying their, contributing their fair share and meeting their financial obligations. This is the United States getting on rebuking the international community, NATO, for not paying their fair share. He got on many nations. And then, of course, the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. These are fulfillments of Bible prophecy, folks. We're living through this. The United States pulling out of this world governing body. Since 1945, we were the main supporter, the main advocate, the driver behind the efforts to a world governing body. Every presidential administration, from 1945 till 2016, every one. Some of them went cautiously, and some of them were drunk on the idea of a world governing body, but they all supported it at the end of their administrations. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, at the end of, have you ever seen anybody start pulling us out of all of these global governing institutions? I mean, one right after another. In Donald Trump, every time he has been talked at the United Nations, he has hammered socialism. Look at his speeches. One thing right after another. The worst thing that's ever happened to Venezuela is that socialism has been instituted there. The United Nations is totally a socialistic organization. So in the face of the international community, Donald Trump has said, no, we don't want globalism running the United States. It's America first. You guys have lived through all of this. Recognition of Jerusalem and moves in 2017, President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moved the U.S. Embassy there. But remember what I said is that the international community views their right there as illegal, and they consider that an international city. And in East Jerusalem, because of Resolution 2334, they see that as an illegal occupation there for Israel. That's why I went back through the history of Israel. God chose Jerusalem as Israel's capital. All throughout the Old Testament, He said, I will put my name there. I'm giving you this land, Abraham, through your lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob forever. And I will put my name in Jerusalem. That's where God specifically chose them to build the temple. God sent Abraham to Mount Moriah to sacrifice Isaac. He sent David there to purchase the threshing floor of Arana. That's where they wanted the temple built, in Jerusalem. And so God chose that as their capital, and yet the international community today, the end-time world government, is against that. They say it's illegal. So President Trump comes along and says, hey, everybody else has talked about moving the U.S. Embassy there. I'm doing it. And he did it. He recognized Jerusalem as Israel's eternal capital in the face of the international community. So you can see there's so much prophetic fulfillment happening right now. We're living it, folks. We don't have to wonder, are we in the end time? Look at what's going on in Israel. Look at the dynamics with President Trump and the world government, and what's going on with the Catholic Church, a hierarchy. We're living through the end times right now.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.